Weathering is the process in which larger rocks are broken into smaller rocks by the force of gravity or chemicals. One example of weathering is when water freezes. When water freezes, it expands. In this case, in this picture, you see where the rock is broken because the water freezes and cracks the entire rock. This breaks a large into a smaller rock. Another example of weathering is when gravity takes place. When we have wind, rain, snow, ice, these things tend to break these rocks into smaller rocks from the larger rock. Another form of weathering is called chemical weathering. With chemical weathering, things such as acid rain change the actual material of the rock. This then in turn changes the way that it looks and also possibly the size. In these three examples, you can see how chemical weathering changes the color, the shape, the size, and the overall look of the rock. We know that weathering is the process of breaking larger rocks into smaller rocks. Now I'm going to move on to erosion. Erosion is the process in which the broken off pieces of the weathered rock are moved away to another place. Oftentimes this is a very slow process, but there are examples of this process moving quickly. Looking at these two examples of eroded rock and materials, you can see that this would take a long time for wind, rain, snow, and glacier activity to move these materials from what they once were. As you can see from these pictures, landslides, avalanches, volcanoes, earthquakes, they all change the earth very quickly. Therefore, the typical erosion that takes millions of years happens within an instant. Finally, deposition is where the materials that are eroded or that have moved end up. Sometimes these create new landmarks such as deltas, and even when you're driving through the mountains, you see the crumbled rock at the bottom of the mountain. From these examples of deposition, you can see examples such as a delta or even where the rock has eroded and lands at the bottom of the hill. The very big difference between erosion and deposition is the fact that deposition is where the materials land and end up. In my conclusion, I would like to remind you that there's a very big difference between the three different kinds of weathering, erosion, and deposition. And I'd like to remind you that every time it starts with weathering, where there's elements of weather and gravity that push the materials downward. Whenever the rocks break from a bigger rock to a smaller rock, that is weathering. Where those broken off pieces move is erosion, and then where they end up is deposition. I hope that this is a great review for you, and that if you have any other questions, you of course will come and see me.